It was a cold winter evening in New York City, the kind that made the glass towers shimmer like ice under the streetlights. Inside one of the city's most luxurious restaurants, a table of powerful men sat surrounded by wealth, pride, and silence. They were dressed in suits worth more than most people's yearly salary, their watches gleaming with arrogance and their words dripping with authority. At the head of the table sat Richard Wallace, the billionaire everyone feared, respected, and envied. He had built an empire from nothing, but tonight, he was about to make a decision that would change his life forever. Before the waiter could refill the glasses, a young waitress, nervous, yet strangely calm, leaned close to him and whispered words that made the entire world pause around him. "Don't sign that. If you believe that one act of kindness or courage can change someone's life forever, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread, because stories like this remind us that compassion still exists, even in the coldest corners of power." Richard turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes scanning the young woman who had just dared to interrupt a billion-dollar deal. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. The other men at the table sneered, amused by what they saw as a servant overstepping her place. But something in Richard's chest, something buried under years of greed and ambition, stirred. For the first time in years, someone wasn't afraid to speak to him, not out of flattery or fear, but out of genuine concern. The waitress, whose name tag read Emily, quickly stepped back, realizing the weight of what she had just done. She tried to disappear into the background, her heart racing. She had seen the document while serving water, just a quick glance, but enough to notice something horrifying. The contract Richard was about to sign would lead to the closure of multiple small companies, one of which was the bakery her late father once owned. A bakery that had fed the neighborhood with warmth and kindness before the big corporations swallowed it whole. She couldn't let another family lose everything the way hers had. Richard sat silently, pen in hand, as the other executives urged him to sign. They reminded him of the profits, the expansion, the numbers. But their voices faded into a blur. All he could hear were those three words echoing in his mind: "Don't sign that." He looked down at the paper. The numbers were dazzling, the promise of greater wealth intoxicating. Yet behind the ink lay countless lives, people he would never meet, stories he would never hear, families who would lose everything while he gained another yacht or mansion. He had spent years chasing power, but at what cost? His wife had left him. His son barely spoke to him. His home, though massive, felt like a hollow museum filled with luxury but no laughter. And now, this young woman, a waitress earning tips just to survive, had the courage to stop him from crossing another line. He set the pen down. The room went silent. Every man at the table stared at him in disbelief. "Richard, what are you doing?" one of them barked. Another whispered angrily, "This deal is everything." But Richard didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, took a deep breath, and said something that made the room freeze: "Maybe everything isn't what I need anymore." The meeting ended abruptly. The partners stormed out, furious. Emily stood frozen near the corner, afraid she had just lost her job. But instead of anger, Richard approached her with an expression she never expected to see: gratitude. He asked her name softly, and she told him. Emily. Just Emily. Over the next few days, Richard couldn't stop thinking about her words. He had built his empire on ruthlessness, but for the first time, he questioned if success meant crushing others beneath it. He went through the files, reviewed the deal, and discovered that Emily had been right: the merger was unethical, exploiting hundreds of workers for the benefit of a few rich men like him. He felt disgusted, not at them, but at himself. He called his lawyer and canceled the agreement. Then, something in him began to shift. Richard Wallace, once the coldest businessman on Wall Street, started visiting the neighborhoods his company had affected. He met the workers who had lost their jobs, the small business owners who had gone bankrupt, and the families struggling to rebuild. And with every handshake, every tear, he felt a weight lifting from his heart. A few weeks later, Richard returned to that same restaurant. The same table, the same quiet ambience, but this time he wasn't there to sign a deal. He asked for Emily. When she approached, nervous as before, he smiled genuinely for the first time in years. He thanked her again, not just for saving him from a bad deal, but for waking him up from a life of blindness. He asked her to sit down, though she hesitated. Then he told her something that left her speechless. He had started a new foundation, not for profit, not for image, but for change. The foundation's goal was to help small businesses recover from corporate takeovers, to support single parents, and to rebuild communities destroyed by greed. He named it the Second Chance Fund. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe that a few whispered words had sparked something this powerful. But Richard wasn't done. He offered her a position at the foundation, not as a token act of charity, but because he believed she had the heart and courage the world needed more of. She accepted, her hands trembling, realizing that her late father's dream of kindness and honesty was somehow being reborn through her. Months passed, and the story of the billionaire and the brave waitress spread across the city. People began calling it the whisper that changed a billionaire's heart. Richard's company transformed. Instead of chasing endless expansion, he began investing in people, paying fair wages, supporting local producers, and funding education programs for underprivileged youth. The men who once measured life in dollars now measured it in lives changed. But the most beautiful part of the story came one evening when Emily was invited to speak at the foundation's first anniversary. Standing before hundreds of people, she looked across the room and saw Richard, smiling, humble, and proud. She told the audience, her voice filled with emotion, that sometimes the smallest act of courage, even a whisper, can echo louder than 1,000 speeches. And when she finished, the entire hall rose to its feet. People clapped, some cried, and Richard's eyes glistened with the kind of tears that only come from redemption. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread, because kindness doesn't need wealth, power, or fame. It only needs courage. Speech Balloon special request, tell us in the comments below, what would you have done if you were in Emily's place? Would you have dared to whisper the truth?